Have you ever been stuck in the middle of a family situation with your in-laws? In this video, we'll discuss what happened when a woman spent a lot of time planning an intervention for her brother-in-law, only to have her husband step in and nix the idea. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we're learning how to read tarot one card at a time. In today's video, we'll be using a 3-card spread to decide how a woman should deal with her brother-in-law's drug addiction. I will be using the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot, and there is a link below. This is a reading that I did for someone I will call Marilyn. This is one of those readings that I could take a long time to set the stage for. However, I'll try to be succinct. Marilyn's brother-in-law, who I will call Peter, is her husband's younger brother and only sibling. Peter has been abusing drugs for many years. He's had a few periods of sobriety, primarily due to forced detoxes, but they have not lasted. Marilyn's mother-in-law has been supporting Peter because, understandably, she does not want to see him living on the streets. Peter lives with his mother, and she also gives him money, presumably for things such as gas and cigarettes, but it's no secret that most of the money goes for drugs. Unfortunately, the situation is taking an increasing toll on the mother-in-law's health and finances. Marilyn is also concerned about her mother-in-law's safety, as Peter can become violent and his friends aren't exactly upstanding citizens. Marilyn, her husband, and Peter are all in their late 40s. Marilyn didn't give me any other details of their lives. She didn't mention that they have children, so I believe they are either childless or their kids are grown and out of the house. I'm also not sure how they earn a living. I do know that Marilyn's mother-in-law is 78 years old. She is a widow who lives modestly in the home that she and her husband purchased exactly 50 years ago. Marilyn's husband and Peter are her only children. Marilyn and her husband live about 600 miles away from her mother-in-law and only see her a couple of times a year. Otherwise, they keep in touch via phone and email. Marilyn is the primary contact. Her husband talks to his mom every couple of months and hesitates to ruin their conversations by bringing up Peter. Meanwhile, Marilyn has kept in touch with her mother-in-law pretty much daily for the last few years. The discussions frequently center around Peter, his drug use, and how difficult he is to live with. Recently, the mother-in-law came across a TV show called Intervention. I'll put a link in the comments if you'd like to learn more. It's a reality TV show that shows people who are addicted to a variety of substances. At the end of the show, the addict goes to a planned meeting where, with the help of an addiction professional, they are confronted with the impact of their drug use and encouraged to go to treatment. Marilyn has been on board with this plan and done a lot of research. She found an interventionist and they settled on a date to visit the mother-in-law and put the plan into action so that Peter would go into treatment. I don't want to make this story any longer than it needs to be. The upshot is that Marilyn's husband, although he initially agreed to participate, disagreed with the boundaries suggested by the interventionist, such as telling Peter that he could not continue living in his mother's house if he was using drugs. Marilyn's husband called his mother and convinced her that the intervention was not a good idea because it wouldn't work and Peter would end up on the streets. At that point, the whole intervention idea fell apart. So here's the reason for the reading. As the mother-in-law's primary contact, Marilyn invested a lot of time and energy into both listening to her mother-in-law complain about the situation and planning the intervention, only to have her husband derail the plan. She doesn't want to put any more energy into the situation, only to be outvoted by her husband. Her question is, how do I deal with my mother-in-law going forward? I used a do this, not that, advice spread to answer Marilyn's question. In position number 1, do this, I drew the 6 of Swords. In position number 2, not that, I drew the 8 of Swords. And in position number 3, advice, I drew the 4 of Cups. Let's talk about my first impressions. We have 2 Swords cards. Swords are about thoughts, but they also cut. So I think this was about Marilyn creating boundaries with her husband and mother-in-law and not getting sucked into the topic of Peter. Perhaps it also has to do with cutting Peter out of their lives or with Peter cutting drugs out of his life. The 4 of Cups is about emotions. I see this as meaning that Marilyn needs to ignore the topic of Peter and focus her attention elsewhere. Position number 1, do this, represents the approach that Marilyn should take. I drew the 6 of Swords. I feel like this card shows Marilyn standing on the dock and watching her husband, brother, and mother-in-law go off in a boat together. Marilyn can see the turbulent water in front of her towards the right of the boat and believes that the situation will not end well. Meanwhile, her husband is looking out over calm waters and blissfully steering the boat forward. The other two are looking downward and ignoring the situation altogether. This is not how Marilyn would handle the situation. However, she needs to accept that she is not in charge. You can see the swords standing on end at the front of the boat. It looks like Peter and the mother-in-law are in a cage, looking out through the bars. Even though they are going somewhere else, their thoughts are keeping them trapped. Peter and his mother need to think differently if they want to escape this drug-created prison. As I said earlier, Peter and the mother-in-law are looking downward and ignoring what's going on. I don't see any indication that they are going to change. Also, we see Peter snuggle up beside his mother. At some level, I think that his mother appreciates his powerlessness and the fact that he relies on her. From Marilyn's standpoint, we see calm waters to the left side of the boat. I feel like if she gives up trying to steer the boat about Peter's situation and looks beyond it, her life will get much calmer and she will have more peace. She should allow her husband to take over, which he already has, and focus on her own life. Position number 2, not that, indicates actions, thoughts, or behavior that Marilyn should avoid. I drew the 8 of Swords. The 8 of Swords is a card about feeling trapped and powerless. Because swords represent thoughts, we see Marilyn in a prison that has been created by her thoughts. I'm guessing that these include, I have the most contact with my mother-in-law, so I know what's best for her. She's clearly unhappy living with a drug addict, and I fear for her safety. And it's up to me to fix the situation. Marilyn has already invested a great deal of time and effort into trying to get Peter into treatment, especially compared to her husband, so I completely understand how she would feel this way. The interesting thing about this card is that the powerlessness is self-imposed. If you look carefully, you can see that the bindings are not on tightly. Marilyn could easily step out of the binding around her body and then remove her blindfold, and then she could walk to freedom. So Marilyn needs to do some self-reflection on why she is feeling stuck in this situation and not willing to rip off the bindings and be free. The message from this card is that Marilyn should not remain stuck. She does have the power to change the situation. Behind Marilyn, we see a large home, possibly a castle, on the cliff. In tarot, homes are generally a symbol of comfort, security, and stability. They are also a person's personal sanctuary and the place where family and friends gather. Right now, the Prison of Swords is keeping Marilyn away from that world. This card is telling her not to stay stuck in the drama of Peter's addiction. She has a wonderful life behind her that she's missing out on. It's time for her to step out of her involvement in trying to fix Peter and her mother-in-law and focus on her own life. You've made it this far in the video, and I wanted to stop and ask for a favor if you're not already a subscriber, and that is to please hit the subscribe button. It's free for you, and it will also help me grow this channel. Plus, it means that you won't miss anything. Thanks so much, and if you're already a subscriber, I truly appreciate your ongoing support. Now let's get back to the video. Position number 3, advice, gives Marilyn advice on how she should handle her mother-in-law going forward. I drew the 4 of Cups. Here we see Marilyn sitting on a hill staring at 3 cups. Cups are about love and relationship. I think these cups represent her mother-in-law, her husband, and Peter. This is what Marilyn is focused on. Here she is sitting on a beautiful hill with a gorgeous view, and she's ignoring it all. It's interesting that, even though she's involved in her in-law's situation, she is also very distant from it. I'm not sure how long she's been married, but blood is still blood. I am very blessed that my parents and mother-in-law are still living, all in their late 80s. Even though my sister and I have been married for almost 40 years, we definitely have more input into my parents' life than our spouses. And it's the same with my husband and his mom. So I feel like Marilyn will always be an outsider, no matter how hard she tries to help. Beside Marilyn is a cup that's being handed to her from Spirit. She is ignoring this too. I believe that this cup represents Marilyn's opportunity to take care of herself and her emotions, basically to put herself first. I think the advice in this card is that Marilyn needs to stop spending her life focused on other people. She needs to quit putting her energy into supporting her mother-in-law and trying to find a solution to Peter's addiction. It's time for her to focus on herself and let the situation be. Let Peter, her husband, and her mother-in-law figure out a solution that works for them, even if they decide to ignore the problem. So let's summarize. How should Marilyn deal with her mother-in-law moving forward? Position number 1, do this, was about Marilyn allowing her husband to steer the boat and take charge of the Peter situation. This will give her a sense of peace and allow her to focus on her own life. Position number 2, not that, tells Marilyn that she needs to step out of her self-imposed prison and not get stuck in the drama of Peter's addiction. And position number 3, advice, gives Marilyn guidance on how she should handle her mother-in-law going forward. The overall advice is that Marilyn needs to stop focusing on her husband's family and focus on herself. This is one of those satisfying readings where Marilyn left feeling like she'd had a weight removed from her shoulders. She didn't plan to cut off communication with her mother-in-law, but she was also not willing to engage with any more discussions about Peter. We discussed ways for her to change the subject by saying something like, "I think this is between you and your sons. Why don't you talk to my husband about it?" I hope that this video gave you some ideas that you can apply to your tarot practice. Please leave a comment if you'd like to share what you've learned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.